Hey everyone, and welcome. So, in this explainer today, we're going to unpack something I find absolutely fascinating. Have you ever been walking through your city and wondered why you naturally gravitate toward a really specific bench? Or why one public square just feels alive and vibrant, while the block right next to it feels totally dead? Well, today we are going to reveal the hidden, deeply social rules that govern human behavior in our favorite urban spaces. We're drawing on this groundbreaking classic research from William H. White called The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. And get ready, because I promise you are never going to look at your city the exact same way again. Right off the bat, here's the core mystery we are solving today. Why do these massive, beautiful, incredibly expensive corporate plazas so often end up completely dead, while tiny, noisy, seemingly random street corners are absolutely packed with people? I mean, for a long time, city planners and corporations were throwing millions of dollars into designing these gorgeous, sweeping urban expanses. We're talking sleek travertine marble, massive modern art installations, but then nobody wanted to use them. They were creating these architectural masterpieces that literally failed completely as human habitats. So to figure out what was going wrong, let's look at how time-lapse cameras instantly busted a massive architectural myth. For decades, the working assumption, the sort of architect expectation, was that city dwellers are totally overwhelmed by the hustle and bustle, and therefore, what they really want is an oasis, an escape from the crowd. But when researchers actually set up these cameras to watch what people do rather than what they say they do, they discovered the human reality. People don't flee the crowd at all. Actually, scratch that, they do the exact opposite. They gravitate right toward the middle of the busiest pedestrian traffic and intentionally block the flow. And that brings us to this wonderfully quirky concept called self-congestion. It's essentially the instinctive human tendency to remain right in the main pedestrian flow. Think about it. When people bump into a friend and stop to have a conversation, they don't politely step over to the side into that nice, empty buffer space. No way. They stop dead in the 100% center of the traffic flow. And why? Because being in the center maximizes your choices for social interaction. It's exactly like hanging out in the kitchen at a cocktail party. The cameras even caught these fascinating, almost silent communication rituals right in the middle of this congestion. Like the Plaza Girl Watchers, these groups of guys who stand near the flow of traffic, completely silent, performing these synchronized, rhythmic foot-rocking gestures. It's this highly functional, entirely unconscious social dance. So after months and months of tracking all these variables, plaza shape, size, aesthetic elegance, trying to figure out why some spaces work and others don't, the researchers finally arrived at this deceptively simple revelation. William H. White put it perfectly. People tend to sit most where there are places to sit. I know. It sounds like a complete joke. It sounds so obvious. But it is literally the fundamental aha moment of urban design. You could build the most beautiful fountain in the world, but it won't keep a single person around if there isn't a comfortable place for them to rest their legs. But here's where it gets really interesting. It all comes down to a specific number, 30 inches. Because you see, not all sitting space is created equal. Architects love to build ledges, but often they're just a little too high, or a little too low, or they're blocked by some prickly shrubbery. The most critical missing dimension is actually the human backside. Researchers found that 30 inches is the exact depth required to make a ledge 2 backsides deep. When a ledge is 30 to 36 inches deep, people can comfortably sit on both sides of it. And this one simple measurement vastly improves social comfort because it gives strangers the physical buffer they need to share a space without feeling super awkward. And speaking of comfort, we have to talk about the actual seats themselves. Architects absolutely love fixed benches. I mean, they look great in photographs, perfectly aligned in their rigid, concrete permanence. But fixed benches dictate social distance, and social distance is this subtle, ever-changing thing. Benches have this sort of manipulative cuteness that says, you will sit exactly here. On the flip side, just look at the massive psychological power of a movable chair. A movable chair provides autonomy. Even if someone only moves a chair 2 inches before sitting down, that tiny little adjustment is a declaration of free will. It enlarges choice, and it allows strangers to communicate civility just by how they angle their seats relative to one another. It's brilliant. Now, sitting is definitely the foundation, but to create a truly perfect microclimate, you need a few more essential elements of comfort. First up is sunlight, or even light bounced off neighboring glass buildings. People naturally seek warmth. Second, you need protection from macro wind drafts. Giant skyscrapers can create winds so fierce you literally need safety lines, so wind baffles are absolutely key. Third, trees, but specifically trees acting as protective canopies, making people feel cuddled and protected from underneath. And finally, water. But we're not talking about water to just look at behind an electric fence. We need touchable, splashable water. The white noise of a rushing waterfall perfectly masks the annoying sounds of street traffic, creating this lovely little acoustic bubble for private conversations. So when you combine all of this comfort, it builds into this incredible phenomenon known as the shill effect. If you ever want to seed an empty place with activity, just put out food. It follows a delightfully simple mechanic. Step 1, a pushcart vendor arrives at an empty corner. Step 2, people stop to eat and then they linger to chat. Step 3, because there's a crowd now, more vendors arrive. Step 4, the building management finally notices this booming unofficial economy and decides to open a formal cafe just to capture the crowd. The optical leverage here is tremendous. Food acts as an absolute magnet to bring a completely dead space to life. To put a human face on these abstract urban planning concepts, let me introduce you to Gus. Gus is a real, everyday food vendor who spent years at the corner of the famous Seagram Plaza. Now, civic establishments often try to police or flat-out ban vendors like Gus. They see them as a nuisance. But the reality? The reality is that Gus is the unofficial caterer of the city's outdoor life. Vendors have this incredible, almost sixth sense for spaces that work. They're out there testing the market daily. When you shoo away a vendor, a massive chunk of that plaza's social life leaves right along with him. Okay, but none of this matters if people can't actually get into the space to begin with, right? The relationship to the street is the absolute critical design factor here. The very best spaces are completely flush with the sidewalk. The transition should be so seamless that it's honestly hard to tell where the street ends and the plaza begins. That seamlessness is what encourages impulsive use. People just drift in naturally. And conversely, this is exactly why sunken plazas fail so miserably. If a plaza is sunk even a few feet below eye level, it feels like you're at the bottom of a well. You're disconnected from the theater of the street, and going down there requires a conscious, deliberate choice, which most people simply aren't going to make. All right, now we have to tackle the elephant in the room. If these welcoming spaces are so fantastic, why aren't there more of them everywhere? Well, the answer comes down to a corporate obsession with what they call undesirables. Many business executives have this intense driving fear that if they make a space really attractive to people, it's going to attract the wrong people, perceived as winos, street musicians, teenagers, or loiterers. And honestly, this single fear drives almost every terrible decision in urban design today. Because of that fear, we end up with defensive design. You've probably seen this. Corporations install metal spikes on ledges, they make benches purposely too short to sleep on, they build high walls, and they leave massive, barren, empty expanses. But here is the massive, ironic tragedy of all this. Designing a place with distrust ends up guaranteeing a completely dead space. And guess who absolutely loves empty, abandoned spaces? The very undesirables the corporations were trying to avoid in the first place. By stripping the space of amenities for normal people, they inadvertently create the scary, isolated environments they were so afraid of. So we have to completely flip the script. Welcoming design, which uses things like movable chairs, cafes, food vendors, and wide open access, leads directly to crowded spaces. And here is the big secret. The absolute best security for any urban space is a massive, welcoming crowd. Think about it. When a space is packed with office workers eating lunch, tourists taking pictures, and families hanging out, it becomes entirely self-policing. It becomes the safest place you can possibly be. And I just love this. The actual record of security infractions over 9 years at Pally Park brilliantly illustrates this point. In a park that is practically begging to be vandalized with its loose, movable chairs and totally open access, the incidents are remarkably, comically minor. Check this out. In 1968, a flower urn was stolen. 1970, someone took the refreshment sign. 1971, a small table went missing. In 1972, someone carved their initials into a tree. And in 1974, a brass light was removed. That is it. 9 years of the most minor infractions imaginable definitively prove that open, trusting spaces are incredibly safe. So, instead of relying on spooky, impersonal TV surveillance cameras, the best spaces utilize what is affectionately known as the Plaza Mayor. This could be anyone, a friendly building guard, a newsstand operator, or a regular vendor. Take Joe Hardy, for example. He was a guard at the Exxon building. But he didn't just stand there scowling with his arms crossed. He acted as a host. He'd offer to take photos for tourists, he bantered with the regulars, and he naturally de-escalated tension with teenagers just by asking for their help. It turns out human connection and a welcoming, proprietary tone will beat electronic enforcement every single time. Now, you might be wondering, what if a place becomes a little too popular? Let's talk about effective capacity. City planners are constantly stressing out about overcrowding, but the truth is, spaces carry far more people than planners fear. A typical good plaza holds about 33 sitters per 100 feet of space. High-density gems like Paley Park hold about 38. And surprisingly, benches on busy, super noisy traffic islands, they can hold up to 50. People will happily pack themselves into a space if it offers a good view of the action. And the crazy part is, it still won't even feel uncomfortably overcrowded to them. The really crucial takeaway here is that a great public space is completely self-leveling. Through that time-lapse photography, researchers saw that even with constant turnover all day long, the exact number of people sitting on a given ledge stayed miraculously consistent. When the capacity was reached, people would just politely move on. When someone left, a new person sat right down. We are basically governed by these invisible social roles that we unconsciously follow to maintain perfect density. We naturally cooperate to keep the space functioning beautifully. It's almost like magic. Which brings us to the end of this explainer. And I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. The very next time you walk out your front door, I want you to look closely at the public spaces in your own city. Really look at the ledges, the benches, the plazas. Were they built to invite you in, to encourage that wonderful, messy human self-congestion? Or were they built with distrust, specifically designed to keep you away? Once you start seeing this hidden language of urban spaces, I promise your daily walk is never going to be the same. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the secret life of the city.